Hi there, folks. Today we're looking at factoring trinomials with a leading coefficient of 1. And really, this is just a little shortcut that we can apply when we have a leading coefficient of 1, when that a value is 1, when the trinomial starts with a 1, all right? It's going to look very similar to what we did with factoring by grouping, all right, where we built a bridge and we split up the middle term and then we factored by grouping. It's going to basically be the same thing, except we're not actually going to factor by grouping. We're going to build a bridge, we're going to come up with the values, and we're going to go right to the answer, all right? This only works, however, when the leading coefficient is 1, when it starts with a 1, when the a value is 1, all right? So again, just a reminder, remember trinomials are in this format of ax squared plus bx plus c. So if you hear me talk about, hey, is the a value 1, I'm asking, is that first number a 1? All right, remember, a, b, and c are the numbers that we have in the trinomial, okay? So when we're talking about the leading coefficient of 1, we're saying the a value is 1. It starts with a 1, all right? And you'll notice here, the first couple steps, it's the same as what we were doing, but then we kind of skip the factoring by grouping part, okay? So once again, if we look at this guy, it says build a bridge, which we already know how to do that. Multiply the first number times the last number, all right? Find the two numbers that multiply together to give me the bridge, but add to the middle coefficient. Again, we've already been doing that. That's the same thing. Normally, our next step is split up the middle term, and then the last step is factoring by grouping. But instead, the only thing that's different when we have an a value of 1 is after that second step, we go right to the answer. We use the two numbers from the previous step instead of splitting up and rewriting the middle term. We use those as the constants of our binomial factors, okay? In other words, the thing is going to factor into an x parentheses and an x parentheses, whatever those two values are. Let's say those two values from this step up here are like an a. A is a bad variable. How about a d and an e? So if it's d and e, well then this is a plus d and a plus e. Okay, we just take whatever those values are and we slap them into those factors and we're done. All right, it's a special shortcut that we get to use when the a value is 1. And here's the thing, if you forget about this shortcut, that is okay. You do not ever have to use this shortcut. You can keep doing what we've been doing, rewrite that middle term and factor by grouping. Plenty of students get really good at factoring by grouping, that get really good at doing the previous thing that we've done. And they say, you know what? Shortcuts are going to confuse me. I'm going to keep building a bridge and factoring by grouping. All right. And that is fine, just fine. All right. If you're in that boat, if that's you, if you're thinking shortcuts are going to mess me up, you don't have to do it this way. Okay. You can continue to factor by grouping. All right. For example, if I look at this guy, once again, I'm going to start off the same way. I'm going to build a bridge. So here, there's a 1 out front here. So keep in mind, when you don't see something written, it's a 1. 1 times a negative 12 is a negative 12. So now I need two numbers that multiply to a negative 12, but add to a positive 4. All right? And those two numbers are a positive 6 and a negative 2. Those multiply to a negative 12, but add to a positive 4. But instead of doing the whole factor by grouping thing, I just do this. I say, okay, one factor, since I had a plus 6, a positive 6 is one of my numbers, is going to be x plus 6. The other value was a negative 2 that I had, so my other factor is going to be an x minus 2. And that's it. I go right to the answer. And keep in mind, once again, if I did factor by grouping, that's okay. Watch this. Ready? X squared plus 6x minus 2x minus 12. If I do factor by grouping, out of the first group, I can factor out an x, leaves me with an x plus 6. Out of the second group, I can factor out a negative 2, leaves me with an x plus 6. I see the x plus 6 in common. The other factor is the x minus 2. I get the same answer. Okay? You can continue to split up the middle term and factor by grouping. That is fine, just fine. But realize that when there's a 1 out front, you can go right to the answer. Okay? Once again, if I look at this guy, build a bridge. Here's a 1 out front. So 1 times 20 is a positive 20. Two numbers that multiply to a positive 20 but add to a negative 9 are a negative 4 and a negative 5. And I could absolutely split up that middle term and factor by grouping, but the shortcut says this. If I have a 1 out front, which I do here, and I have a -4 and a -5, I'm going to do x minus 4 for the -4, and I'm going to do an x minus 5 for the -5, and that's going to be my answer. No other work is required, okay? This only works, though, when the a value is 1, when the leading coefficient is 1, when it starts with a 1. If it doesn't start with a 1, you have to do the thing that we've been doing. You have to split up the middle term. You have to factor by grouping, okay? If I look at the next one, again, build a bridge. There's a 1 out front, so 1 times a -100 is a -100. Two numbers that multiply to a -100 but add to a -15 are going to be a -20 and a +5, okay? And so because this starts with a 1, I can go right to the answer here. It's going to be an x minus 20 because of the -20 and an x plus 5 because of the +5. I'm just using these values as the numbers in my binomials, and I'm done. Okay? But again, you can only do that when it starts with a 1. If I look at the next one, there's a 1 out front. I build a bridge, two numbers that multiply to a 77, but add to a +18. Well, that's going to be a +7 and a +11. And because this starts with a 1, I can go right to the answer of x plus 7 because of the +7 and x plus 11 because of the +11. Done and done. All right. And once again, if you split up that 18 into the 7x and the 11x and factor by grouping, you will get the same answer. You do not have to use this shortcut. Okay. If I look at the next one, when you look at this one, you might notice right away there is not a 1 out front. So the way this is written, am I allowed to use my shortcut? The answer is no. I cannot use the shortcut on this one the way it's written because there's not a 1 out front. However, if you look for greatest common factor first, you'll notice these all have a 3 in common. So I can take a 3 out, which leaves me with an x squared plus 7x plus 12. Now look at the trinomial that's left. There's a 1 here, and I build a bridge. See, now there's a 1, so now I'm allowed to use my shortcut. This is the advantage of always looking for the greatest common factor first, okay? Any of the shortcuts that we will ever learn will only work if you factor out the greatest common factor first. If you don't factor out the greatest common factor, you have to do this one the long way, all right? Will you still get to the same answer eventually? Yes, okay? You'll factor it, and then you'll factor a greatest common factor at the end, and that is okay. Two numbers that multiply to a 12 but add to a 7 are a 4 and a 3. Because I now have a 1 out front there, see the 3 just kind of tags along for the ride. When I look at the trinomial, it starts with a 1, so I can go right to the two answers of x plus 4 and an x plus 3. And that's it. Okay? If I look at the next one, same kind of thing. I can't use the shortcut the way that is written. All right, it has a 2 out front. I'm not allowed to use the shortcut when there's a 2, but these all have a greatest common factor of 2, so I factor the 2 out first. And by doing that, by factoring out the 2 first, it gives me a 1 in front of my x squared. It gives me an a value of 1, which means now after I build a bridge, two numbers that multiply to a -24 but add to a -5 are a -8 and a +3. I'm allowed to do my shortcut because now the a value is 1. All right? The 2 tags along for the ride. Sorry, that's got to be in blue, right? The 2 tags along for the ride. And now my 2 factors, because I can go right to the answer, are an x minus 8 and an x plus 3. Okay? So I'm doing the same thing that I've been doing. I'm still building a bridge. I'm still coming up with those 2 magic numbers. But when the a value is 1, I can use those numbers to go right to the factors. Okay? If you don't like this shortcut, that is okay. You can keep splitting up the middle term and factor by grouping, and it will work. Okay?